Before we do our Are You Ready today, I want to go over a few things that you guys have learned in previous years in school. Just get those back in your mind so that you are able to do well on this. So we are going to be writing an expression from words. So an expression is pretty much like an equation. It just doesn't have the equal sign and the answer with it. So it's really just the problem. What are you going to do? So when given words, we can write what the expression is. We can go backwards from that, write the expression from the write the statement from the mathematical expression. And we can also solve and find the value of the expression. So a few things we need to remember is we need to understand all of these words here. So when we have the sum, that is the answer to an addition problem. So let's hook sum and add together. When we times, so look and see if you can find any other words that you think mean to times. So we can multiply. That is a common word we use when we say times. And mathematically, it is called the product. When we find the product, we are multiplying. When we find the difference of numbers, that means we are going to subtract, or another word might be to minus those. And then if we divide numbers, the answer to that is the quotient. So all of these words could be used, and we've got to know what they mean. And we've got this last word here is quantity. Another word for that is just number. The number of whatever, number 12, that means you have 12 things. What are you going to do with that quantity? So another thing I'd like to review is the order of operations. You might have also heard the acronym of, I P in a really funny place when I typed. You also might have heard it called PEDMAS, parentheses, exponents, divide, multiply, add, subtract. I like to shorten that down to GEMS. So when we are doing math, it's just like in your writing classes, in your reading classes. We read from left to right. There are certain punctuations that mean certain things, like a period tells us that that's the end of a sentence. Capitals go at the beginning. Mathematical expressions are the same way. There's certain things that we have to follow, just like in the alphabet, the letter B makes a sound B. We know that when we're doing a math problem, that our grouping symbols, our parentheses, have to come first. That's going to be the beginning of our sentence, even if it's somewhere not at the beginning. So it has an order that it has to follow, just like when we're reading. There's a mathematical language, and we've got to understand and follow that, or we will not be able to get the right answers here. So when we are doing order of operations, we always do what's in the parentheses first. So whether it's add, subtract, multiply, divide, whatever's inside the parentheses, that's what has to come first. They put the symbols around it to say, do this first. After we do what's in the parentheses, we look for any exponents, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about those tomorrow. Then we do any multiplication operations. This also means the opposite of multiply is to divide. So anytime we see multiply or divide, that means we are doing those from left to right. So just because we say multiply, divide, that doesn't mean you multiply first always. If divide comes first in the problem, we want to do that first because these are equals. The opposite of multiply is divide. If I have 12 divided by 3 equals 4, I can flip that around and say 4 times 3 is 12. They are the same expression, just written a different way. So these are equals. And then we have our subtraction operations, and the opposite of subtract is to add. And so we group those together, but we always work from left to right. So as we are doing some of these problems, we need to remember, what do we want to do first? that needs parentheses around it, especially if we're going to add or subtract first. If you want to multiply or divide first, you don't necessarily need parentheses around that because you have to multiply before you add, unless there's parentheses around it. So we need to think about using the parentheses to show what do we want done first. So let's take a look here. We're going to write the expression, so the mathematical expression, and we need to think if we need to add or subtract first, we need to make sure that we get parentheses around that part of our expression. So our first one here says we have 7 times the sum of 3 and 6. So the sum of 3 and 6 means we're going to add 3 and 6 together. And then we're going to times that by 7. So I can hear it wants us to multiply first. So we're going to do 3 plus 6. And I want to put that in parentheses because I want to add first. And then there's a couple ways we can write this 7. We can either say to then multiply it by 7. So I know it said 7 first, but we had to do the sum of 3 and 6 first, then multiply 7. We could also put this 7 in front and say 7 times 3 plus 6. Or another way we can do this is to we can also put a dot instead of this multiplication sign. Or another way we can just completely get rid of that multiplication sign is just to say 7 parentheses 3 plus 6. When you have a number right next to the parentheses, that means to multiply. I want 7 groups of this. So 7 of these inside the parentheses. So you'll start to see this quite often in your math work here. Okay, our next one says to divide 8 by 4 and add 7. So I'm hearing first we're dividing 8 by 4. So go ahead and write that down. So we need to take 8 and divide it by 4, then add 7. So and add 7. We are doing 8 divided by 4 first. We could put parentheses. We don't need them though, because even when I write 8 divided by 4 plus 7, multiplication symbols and operations, which is a divide too, because that's the opposite, come first before adding. And so I would still have to do 8 divided by 4 first. The parentheses just are drawing your attention to say, yes, do this first. Hey, here we have that we are going to subtract 6 from 17, then multiply by 4. So subtract 6 from 17. So we have 17. 17's got to come first because we're taking 6 away from that. So 17 minus 6, then times by 4. So the first thing it wants us to do is subtract. So in order for us to subtract first, what do we need to put around that subtraction problem? So we need to put parentheses around that subtraction problem to make sure that we do that first. Otherwise, we would have to do 6 times 4 first. So if we want to group these together and say this is part of the problem that we need to do, we've got to put those parentheses there. Hey, the quantity, so remember that is just another word for numbers. So the number 8, so we have 8. We're going to times by 9 and then divide by 4. So 8 times 9 divided by 4. So see if you can write that out. So we've got 8 times 9, and then we're going to divide by 4. So it's asked us to do 8 times 9 first. We don't need parentheses around that because divide and multiply are equals. So we would just do the first one that we come to. Hey, now we have 42 divided by the difference of 2 subtracted from 9. So 42 divided by this. So this sounds like it's a group. We need to figure this out in order to divide it into 42. So the difference of 2 subtracted from 9. So we're taking 2 away from 9. So that means 9 comes first. And then we're subtracting 2. And since we want to do this first and it's subtraction, we need to make sure we get those parentheses to say do this first. So now let's think about we're dividing 42 by 9 minus 2. So 42 needs to go in the front. 42 divided by 9 minus 2. If we put 42 on the back, that would say 9 minus 2, which is 7. That would say 7 divided by 42, which looks like this, 7 divided by 42. And that's not what the problem asked. It said 42 divided by this. What you're dividing by needs to be on the outside here. So we need to think about what goes first when we're dividing and when we are subtracting. When we multiply and add, that commutative property of it's the same either way, 3 plus 4 is 7, 4 plus 3 is 7. We can flip our add and multiply, but we can't flip our subtract and divide. Okay, let's try one more here. So the quantity or the number 24 minus 15, then multiplied by 6. So go ahead and try that one. So we have 24 minus 15, then we're multiplied. So multiplied by 6. So we need to minus first. So we want to make sure we put parentheses around our minus. So remember when we are multiplying, we could also put the dot instead of the multiplication symbol. Or like up here, we could have even just written 6 in front of the parentheses. It does come in front usually when you're writing. It's kind of like that mathematical language. When you're not putting the symbol, we usually put the group, the quantity that you want in front of the parentheses to say, yes, I want 6 groups of this. So I could write it out as 6 parentheses 24 minus 15, and that would give me the same answer. So we just really need to think about what is the question asking us and what do we need to do first. Okay, so now we're going to go backwards and we are going to write the expression that we have. So remember, expressions just don't have equal signs as a statement. So, and there is more than one way to write these, just like there's more than one way to write some of these. So this one, since there's no parentheses around the adding, we do that after. So the first thing we're going to do here is do 7 times 5, and then we're going to add on 4. So we're going to say 7 times, let me move this up so we can see it. We're going to say 7 times 5. We could say plus 4. We could say with 4 added on. We could say 7 multiplied by 5. So lots of ways to write the same thing. So let's try this next one here. So now we have 8 groups of 3 plus 9. So we're going to take 3 plus 9 and then multiply that by 8. And we need to be clear when we're writing this that we want to do 3 plus 9 first. So I'm going to actually write about that first. Even though it's at the end of the problem, it has these parentheses to tell us to do that first. So we're going to say, so I could say the sum of 3 and 9. So sum tells me I need to add the sum of 3 and 9 multiplied by 8. So here's what we do first, then multiply that by 8. So 3 plus 9 times by 8. Okay, this one here, we have 37 minus 7 divided by 6. Okay, this one here, we have 37 minus 7 divided by 6. So it wants us to subtract first. If it did not have these parentheses, we would have to divide first because multiply and divide come before add and subtract. But since we have these parentheses, we're going to subtract first. So we're going to say 37 minus 7. Then we take that and divide it by 6. So whatever we want first, we want to write about and be clear that comes first. Okay, our last one, we have 5 plus 19 divided by 4. So we need to add first. So we're going to take the sum of 5 and 19 divided by 4. So just pay attention to what do you need to do first and write about that, then do the next part. Okay, so now we're going to actually solve these expressions. We're going to use that GEMS strategy. So we always want to use our grouping symbols first, then any multiplicative operations, so our multiply and divide, then our subtraction, so subtract and add here. So go ahead and write down 8 times 3, parentheses, 3 plus 4, close parentheses. So let's do this one together, and then I'll have you try some on your own here. So we always start with our grouping symbols. So 3 plus 4 is 7. I like to write my answer underneath, and then I like to cross that out. I know these ones are short, but we're going to be using a lot longer ones. So if we can practice this strategy now, we will help ourselves in the long run. And then bring down anything else. So times 8. So 8 times 7 is 56. So we're really, I like to call it funneling down to get that answer. So looking here, so we have 9 plus 3 times 2. So I don't see any grouping symbols. So what part of this problem do we need to do first? So we need to multiply first because, so we've got no grouping symbols. We don't have any exponents. Then we're looking for our multiply and divide operations, and then our adding and subtracting. So 3 times 2 is 6. So I'm going to cross that off because I've used all of this. That just helps me not accidentally reuse this 3. And then bring down anything I didn't just do. So now we add 9 plus 6 is 15. So I want you to go ahead and try 36 divided by 6 times 4. And then we will come back and check. So the first thing I'd want to do is 36 divided by 6. This problem doesn't actually need these parentheses. It could just say 36, whoops, that's a divide sign, divided by 6 times by 4. And because we're reading left to right, and these are the equal symbols, multiply and divide, not one is not more important than the other. I would still do 36 divided by 6 first because I came to it first. So 36 divided by 6 is 6. I'm going to cross this off and bring everything else down. 6 times 4 is 24. Hey, let's try this one over here now. Kind of in a funny place. So write the problem down. We have parentheses, 4 plus 5, close parentheses, divided by 3. So think about what do we need to do first, which is our G for groups. So do our grouping first, then finish the problem. So 4 plus 5 is 9. Since this was in my parentheses, we did it first. Cross it off and bring everything else down. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Hey, go ahead and try this one here. So we have 11 plus 4, so close parentheses, divided by 5 plus 7. So think about, we need to do our groups first. Then we don't have any exponents. Then we'll do our multiplication operations, then our subtraction ones. So 11 plus 4 is 15. So I'm crossing that off, bringing everything else down. So now we're done with our parentheses. So we're looking for divide and multiply. So here's our first one. So we're doing 15 divided by 5 is 3. Cross it off. Bring everything else down. 3 plus 7 is 10. Hey, last one before you do the are you ready? Parentheses 17 minus 12, close parentheses, times 9 plus 3. So go ahead and try that one out. So we want to do our groups first. So 17 minus 12 is 5. Crossing that off, bringing everything else down. So now I'm looking for we don't have any exponents. Our groups are all gone. It's looking for multiply and divide. So here's 1 here. So 5 times 9 is 45. Cross that off. Bring everything else down. 45 plus 3 is 48. So make sure you follow the mathematical rules as you are working on these problems. So go ahead and try the Module 8. Are you ready? And let me know if you need help with anything.